So what? To have spoken of a new vision is to be asked in the next breath, what good will it do? When you come to think of it, this is astonishing, but it is invariably true in speaking with people brought up in the environment of Protestantism. Catholics, Hindus, Buddhists, Muslims, and Taoists understand that vision, or contemplation, is good in itself, even the supreme good, in the sense of the beatific vision, where all beings are eternally absorbed in the knowledge and love of God. But this possibility makes Protestants nervous. The reason is, I suppose, that modern Protestantism, particularly in its liberal and progressive forms, is the religion most strongly influenced by the mythology of the world of objects and of man as the separate ego. Humanity so defined and so experienced is, of course, incapable of pleasure and contentment, let alone creative power. The separate person is without content in both senses of the word. He lives perpetually on hope, on looking forward to tomorrow, having been brought up this way from childhood. If you want to find a true folk religion in our culture, look at the rites of Santa Claus. Even before the beginning of Advent, which was supposed to be a 3 to 4 week fasting period in preparation for the feast, the trees are decorated for Christmas, the shops glitter with tinsel and festive displays of gifts, and public address systems warble electronic carols so that one is sick to death of Venite Adoremus long before Christmas Day. Trees are already baubled and illumined in most homes, and as the big build-up proceeds, they are surrounded by those shiny packages with shimmering ribbons which look as if they held gifts for princes. By this time, Christmas parties have already been held in schools and offices before closing for the actual holiday, so that by Christmas Eve, the celebrations have just about blown their top. But there are still those packages under the tree and stockings by the fireplace. When at last the day comes, the children are frantic. Hardly able to wait for breakfast, and not having slept most of the night, they tear those gold and silver parcels to shreds as if they contained nothing less than the elixir of life or the philosopher's stone. By noon, the living room looks as if a waste paper truck had crashed into a dime store, leaving a wreck of mangled cartons, excelsior, wrapping paper, and writhing ribbons. Neckties, upended dolls, half-assembled model railroads, spacesuits, plastic atom bombs, and scattered chocolate bars, hundreds of tinker toy pieces, crushed tree ornaments, miniature sports cars, water pistols, bottles of whiskey, and balloons. An hour later, the children are blubbering or screaming and have to be shooed out of doors while the mess is shoved together to make room for Christmas dinner. Thereafter, the 12 days of Christmas are spent with upset stomachs, colds, and influenza, and on New Year's Eve, the adults get stoned to forget the whole thing. Well, it was fun describing it, but the point is that intense expectation fizzled. Expectation is kindled again to keep us all going for that golden, galuptious goody at the end of the line. What could it be? The children knew it well until they got caught in the rat race. One of the best Christmas presents I ever had was a cheap ring with a glass diamond. It was quite incidental, something that came out of a cracker box at a party. But I sat down in front of the fireplace with this enchanted object and turned it to catch the different colors of light which blazed inside it. I was in touch with the timeless paradise world. Children are in touch with paradise to the extent that they have not fully learned the ego trick, and the same is true of cultures which, by our standards, are more primitive and, by analogy, childlike. If then, after understanding, at least in theory, that the ego trick is a hoax and that beneath everything I and universe are one, you ask, so what? What is the next step, the practical application? I will answer that the absolutely vital thing is to consolidate your understanding, to become capable of enjoyment, of living in the present, and of the discipline which this involves. But the way is not back to some supposedly simpler time. Just as science overcame its purely atomistic and mechanical view of the world through more science, the ego trick must be overcome through intensified self-consciousness. For there is no way of getting rid of the feeling of separateness by a so-called act of will, by trying to forget yourself, or by getting absorbed in some other interest. This is why moralistic preaching is such a failure. it breeds only cunning hypocrites. Saints have always declared themselves as abject sinners, through recognition that their aspiration to be saintly is motivated by the worst of all sins, spiritual pride, the desire to admire oneself as supreme success in the art of love and unselfishness. The ego trick seems to reaffirm itself endlessly in posture after posture. But as I pursue these games, as I become more conscious of being conscious, more aware that I am unable to define myself as being up without you, or something other than myself, being down, I see vividly that I depend on your being down for my being up. I would never be able to know that I belong to the in-group of nice or saved people without the assistance of an outside group of nasty or damned people. All winners need losers. All saints need sinners. All sages need fools. That is, so long as the major kick in life is to amount to something or to be someone as a particular, separate godlet. But the question is how to get over the sensation of being locked out from everything other, of being only oneself, an organism flung into unavoidable competition and conflict with almost every object in its experience. There are innumerable recipes for this project, almost all of which have something to recommend them. There are the practices of yoga meditation, dervish dancing, psychotherapy, Zen Buddhism, Ignatian, Silesian, and other methods of prayer, the use of consciousness-changing chemicals such as LSD and mescaline, psychodrama, group dynamics, sensory awareness techniques, Quakerism, Gurdjieff exercises, relaxation therapies, the Alexander method, autogenic training, and self-hypnosis. The difficulty is that the more you strive for some kind of perfection or mastery, in morals, in art, or in spirituality, the more you see that you are playing a rarefied and lofty form of the old ego game, and that your attainment of any height is apparent to yourself and to others only by contrast with someone else's depth of failure. This understanding is at first paralyzing. You're in a trap, in the worst of all double binds, seeing that any direction you may take will imply and so evoke its opposite. Decide to be a Christ, and there will be a Judas to betray you and a mob to crucify you. Decide to be a devil, and men will unite against you in the closest brotherly love. Your first reaction may be simply, to hell with it. The only course may seem to be to forget the whole effort and become absorbed in trivialities, or to check out of the game by suicide or psychosis and spend the rest of your days babbling in an asylum. But there is another possibility.